Hey, everyone out there in YouTube land, Dan here, aka the Comic Concierge. And this is one of my graphic thoughts videos. This is where I pick out 3 graphic novels and give my thoughts and opinions on them. And just to warn you up front, I'm not going to go over any spoilers. So if you've not read these books, don't worry. I'm not going to give you anything that's beyond just their general premise. You know, something you would see in a trailer if it came out. So if that's something you avoid, sure, but ultimately my hope is to kind of give you an idea of what they're about, let you know if I liked them, if I didn't like them, and who might like them, even if I didn't, or if I did like them, why I did like it. The reason I do these videos is because I feel like the comic conversation often gets dominated by weekly issues, or whatever you want to call them, floppies, what have you. And while I love floppies, I love superhero books, I love indie books, I often feel like some of the best comic book creations, some of the best comic book stories are in this format, or at least it shows you the diversity of the medium. So spend some time looking at these, and these are 3 very different books, although they do all center on a theme of human connection, but in very different and severe ways. Some a little bit more romantic, some a little bit more, let's say, cynical, and some get downright evil in a way. So let's go ahead and look at the books we'll be talking about today. The first one I'm going to be talking about is the manga A Perfect World. Then we're going to move over to, from Fantagraphics, Maids. And lastly, we'll finish up with Summer Blonde. These are the 3 books we'll be talking about today. And I'm excited to talk about them. We start with The Perfect World, the manga. And this is written and drawn by Rie Aruga. This is the type of book I think I would categorize as something that is probably very successful at appealing to the people it is trying to garner with its creation. And like, it's very much, I think, up a certain person's alley, which is not necessarily me. So let me kind of explain what this story is. And it's, I am trying to read more and more manga, and I want to read more manga that is more human drama based, less, about superheroes or supernatural, just stuff that's about human interaction, kind of like your indie stories in a way. And this is one that seemed to have that. It centers on a relationship between these 2 individuals, and they were former high school students together. And when they were in high school, they kind of had a crush on one another that never went anywhere all that far. But now, later, after they've graduated from college, they've kind of had a chance meeting and started up their relationship again. And all those old feelings are kind of there, but they're not really sure. It's just that they're having a lot of these mixed reactions ultimately. And to further complicate matters, and I apologize because I forget all the characters' names, the male protagonist also has been dealt an injury. He got in an accident causing a spinal cord injury, which means he cannot walk, and he cannot feel anything basically from his waist down. And it becomes really the central story in that, where she feels a little bit guilty about what happened and her reaction to it, and she's not sure if she could ever date anyone in a wheelchair. It's just, and that's kind of one of the things that I don't know, didn't necessarily appeal to me, is that everything that happens is at a 10. Like, any type of setback, anything that any type of reaction to anything, no one just has like a normal human reaction. It's like the biggest and the worst thing ever, or the best and the most amazing thing ever. And with what is very soap opera-esque, it's like it is hard-nosed melodrama in that way, where everything is super important, and it just got a little overbearing at times. It's just like, guys, let's settle down a little bit here. The conversation they had was devastating if it went the right way or the wrong way. And I get that's obviously maybe me being old and cynical when you're in those type of relationships, when you are that age, and they can feel that way. So I definitely think, again, when you're in that, I could see why this would appeal to you, because it's something you're probably going to relate to as an old bitter man. Maybe that's not the case. I'm not that bitter. But the other thing that was a little bit weird with this is, as we're reading this, the main protagonist, male, he's an architect, and he's trying to get some buildings made. He's going in this major project, hopefully to kind of put his name out there in order to be one of the prime builders moving forward, one of the prime architects moving forward. And there's also a conversation he has within this about, putting ramps in a certain building, and like the person who's doing it's like, no, we're not going to do that. We don't have the time or money. And part of me is like, you can't not have ramps. That's against the law. I'm like, oh yeah, Japan that they maybe don't have the American Disabilities Act like America does, where you have to make sure that everyone that's handicapped can have access to exits and things like that. So it's one of those, one of the benefits of reading something like this. You do realize those cultural differences that we don't necessarily think of, and rarely is the United States the country that has advanced further on an issue like this, but that is the case here. So this is one of those books that's a little hard to review in the sense of, I think it's very successful at doing what it sets out to do, but I just thought the way it approached it was overbearing at times, and just I thought there was no interaction in this that I felt had any type of nuance. Everything was just on the page and very in your face. And again, I think that is stylistically something I think a lot of people would probably enjoy. But personally, and as we'll get into some of the other books, that's much more up my alley. So I'm glad to read a manga again that's just human interaction. There's no monsters here or anything like that, just people being people, which is cool to see, because again, you get more of that look into the lens of what the world's like outside of your own, because you get more realistic situations that like dealing with disabilities and how that's different, where you wouldn't probably get that in some other more fantasy-based or science fiction-based book. So again, it's The Perfect World Volume 1. I don't think I'll be continuing it, but it's out there if you're interested. One of the books that I read, as well as I mentioned, is Maids, and this is written and drawn by Katie Skelly. And this was one of the books I was really regretting not being able to read last year. Each year for Geekcast Radio, I do a top 100 comics of the year. So I read a lot of graphic novels. I'm trying to read as much as I possibly can, but there are always those books that I don't get to because of whatever reason. In this case, it's just my library never got it. And yes, majority of the books, all the books I'm talking about today, I got from the library. It can be expensive to buy these things. So the library is an amazing resource if you're a comic book fan. Highly advised checking it out. So when I do these graphic thoughts videos, everything I'm reading is coming from the library in most cases. So every case so far. So finally got it though earlier this year, got my reserved copy and checked it out. And I have to say, I don't know if it was just the expectations were too high, because I saw so many people who love this. It just did not hit me quite there. What this book is about, it's two sisters who are, as the title says, maids. You see their life in the lens that they're leaving. And if you read the description, it actually gives away the entire story here. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew that it was getting a lot of praise. A lot of people loved it. And I have enjoyed Katie Skelly's work in the past. So I thought, oh, this is going to be perfect. This will be right up my alley. And I did like the approach of what it was doing. You saw just the class system that they were kind of placed into, these two young sisters who just were living a life that was just simply unfair. Just the world just continuing to beat them down, dealing with a mom who just hated them and just treated them like garbage, sent them off to boarding school, and that in the boarding school they were also not accepted. So, and they went through all that just to be maids, and now working with this family that again treats them rather coldly, and you see them just trying to kind of beat them down emotionally because things aren't working in their lives. So the maids are there as just another target for them to hit to make themselves feel better. It's like, the guy who gets yelled at work every day, and just to let out frustration, he kicks the dog and something like this. But they're not kicking people physically; they're metaphorically just beating them down emotionally. One sister gets the maid job for the other one, and just so they can finally see each other because they've been apart. And their relationship is complex, and as the issue goes on, you slowly are seeing the intensity of the book increase, and there's just this anger that is hidden in the shadows that you can kind of miss, but when it comes to the end, it explodes. And I don't want to give the ending away. I will say, if you read the description of the book, it tells you everything, because this is based upon a true story. And again, I didn't even know that. I just went in to see it, and it ended up being not at all what I expected. I saw what it was doing. I definitely thought, the message is there, but I couldn't get into it in any deeper level than that. It's like reading a protest sign, and you agree with the message, but it's just paper thin in that sense. There's no depth there. I'm not saying there's no depth to the story, because there is, but I can never get beyond just the message. Like it just felt like it was pointing to that direction from the get-go, and by the time you got to the end, it was shocking. I'll give it that. It was extremely shocking, and a bit came out of nowhere. Again, being based upon a real story, clearly it's, there's a reality there. But I went back and read it again, and there's a lot of foreshadowing that I can't miss. So this is a very well crafted book. I don't necessarily disagree with those that said it was an amazing book, because I think objectively it certainly is. There's a lot to take from it. Just subjectively, is a book that I enjoyed reading, or at the end had that reaction towards. It just wasn't there for me, and I'm trying to search the words to say why that happened, and sometimes I don't know, and it's just one of those things where you hear a song that everyone loves, or you watch a movie everyone loves, and for whatever reason it just doesn't kind of washes over you. Like, I don't know, I didn't get it, and I don't know. So maybe there's something here I'm not getting. But I'm going to go back now that I've read it, because I don't necessarily read reviews of anything until I've done my own review, just so it doesn't impact when I do talk about a book, because I don't want to subconsciously like take something someone else says and put it in my own review. So I'll go back and just see those that maybe have analyzed this on a deeper level, to see again if there's something I missed that is there that I'm not necessarily appreciating, or maybe it's just not for me. That also happened. The next book I want to talk about is the book I did enjoy the most out of all the books I read, and that's Adrian Tomine's Summer Blonde. This came out in 2003. The reason I picked this up, obviously, like, why I pick up this book from like 18 years ago, which, man, 2003 being that long ago, it just feels wrong. But why did I pick this book up? Well, one of my favorite books last year was The Loneliness of the Long Distance Cartoonist by Adrian Tomine, and I just love that book. It's a memoir of his life, and from like him being a rising star to him now being a father, in the creation of the book itself. It was just, again, one of my favorite comic book genres are memoirs, and it hit all those notes. It was just awkwardness in comic book form. One of my favorite parts of that is when he goes on this like comic book cruise, and it's just a disaster, because people want to see people, like Neil Gaiman and those type of stars, and you have this indie creator that is very niche and no one really knows who he is, but he has to have dinner with these people, and it's just weird. But also, remember when people went on cruises, that was fun. But so I love that book, and I thought I need to read more of his stuff. The only other book I read from him is Killing and Dying, that came out a few years ago. Did really enjoy that too. This is more on the line of Killing and Dying, where you have separate stories. This has 4 different stories, short stories, and they all center on, I would say, just awkwardness in a way, isolationism, and just the inability to kind of express yourself in the way that kind of withholds your true feelings, or the way that the world, you just don't fit into the world. Each of the main characters kind of just has difficulty relating to people for whatever reason. And I think my favorite story was one that involved a woman who was working in a call center, and she gets fired because she's talking to like a celebrity who ends up being William Shatner, and she makes a joke about beaming him up, and he gets mad and complains, and she gets fired. But she has this kind of just a series of horrible things that happen later in her life. But she's home, and just to pass time, she starts calling payphones, because again, this is 2003. Payphones still kind of exist, and she calls payphones, people pick it up, and she just strikes these kind of juvenile prank calls, but a chance encounter, a meet cute, if you would, and it leads down to a very different relationship. Now, this is not, I would not put this at the romantic comedy level. This is anything but. And again, relating this to something like A Perfect World, where everything is at a 10 emotionally, like here, emotion is expressed in a very subtle and, say, like a level of melancholy throughout. People more emotionally inept in how they express themselves, and it just leads to ultimate fallout. Like if there's one complaint about the book, is that maybe it does strike the same note a little bit too much. That loner who is unable to kind of find their place in life for whatever reason. There are multiple reasons. You have also like a high school story where you have these two guys who are friends, and some people think they're gay because they're always hanging out with one another, and they're not, but maybe they are. They both seem unsure, and it's just this uncertainty of really knowing who you are, and that again is something that runs out throughout. And then there's another story that involves a guy who's trying to get up the courage to ask this girl out who works at a card shop, and he doesn't, and then it ends up through a chance encounter dating his neighbor, and it just it again, huge fallout from that as it basically he tries to do everything possible, causes a problem and tries to fix it, and it just goes haywire. Everything that could go wrong will go wrong. There's no, I think, happiness in this. There are moments of humor. It's very funny in that type of way, but I love the approach, and how, again, I love short stories like this, that craft is of telling a complete story in only, a limited amount of pages. His art is great. He's a great cartoonist. I mean, his stuff has been in things like The New Yorker and things like that clearly are more not necessarily designed for sequential storytelling, but he's great at that as well. His characters all are very distinct, and clearly you can always tell the emotion that they're feeling. These are people that say one thing and feel another, so you really need art that can sell that emotion, and he does. And he fills in the gaps where the words can't, and that's why he's, I think, such the accomplished cartoonist that he is. This again may not be for everyone, because may just seem a little bit too trite in a way for some people, and you may not may wonder at the end of the day, like, why exactly did I read that? Now I just feel bad about myself. There are, I think, elements of hope there. I don't know, it's just self-realization, I thought, was really strong with it. And I don't know if it's because I read the other story when I was just like, I need something that's more geared back, and it just hit the right accord for me. But again, this is really a well-regarded book because, like I said, Adrian Tomine is one of the more pronounced, like, well-accomplished cartoonists really since the 90s. So I wouldn't put it on the same level that I enjoyed as the Loneliness of Long Distance Cartoonist, mainly because that being such his story, his real life story, it just was a little, hit a little bit stronger. But as a piece, as a story piece, as a storytelling piece, as a thematic exploration, it's really good. So highly advise checking it out. If you like things like Daniel Close's books, like Ghost World, I think you'd really like this. It hits a very similar beat. And maybe some people would complain that it's very too similar. I know in The Loneliness of the Long Distance Cartoonist, that was a point made up a lot about him kind of borrowing from other sources. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. It's just totally they're similar, but narratively, I do feel like his structure is much different than Close's. Close's, I think, has a bigger harshness to his work, especially something like Ghost World or Wilson, where you just have characters that are very despicable in some ways, where I never got the sense, even when you have these characters that, are just doing things they shouldn't, but I think ultimately come from a good place, or at least try to. Alrighty, that's it for me for this week. One book I would really strongly recommend, Maids, a book that I would recommend with an asterisk, and then A Perfect World when I can't, unless it's really something that is going to fit into the type of storytelling that you enjoy. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for taking the time of checking it out. Just remember that comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, keep reading.